Hello and good evening, everybody. We are all very pleased that you could join us. I welcome you to the Pi Alpha Alpha Spring Career Networking event, Finding Your Vocation in Public Service. Pi Alpha Alpha is a National Honor Society which promotes excellence in the study of public administration and encourages public service. The Villanova Chapter, chartered in March of 2010, hosts biannual meetings to promote educational and informational sessions for PAA members, as well as the Masters of Public Administration students, alumni, faculty, and university administrators. Each spring networking event, we invite MPA alumni and friends who are currently working in the public sector to talk with students and alumni about their careers and to provide some networking tips and tools. This year, we are pleased to have with us Amanda Serock, Township and Sewer Authority Manager for Chadsford Township, and Dr. Alexander Henderson, Assistant Professor of Healthcare and Public Administration at Long Island University. Amanda and Alex will discuss their current careers and how they found their vocation in public service and what their MPA has meant for them both academically and professionally. So I'd like to introduce Amanda and give you a little bit of background about her. Amanda currently serves as the Township and Sewer Authority Manager for Chadsford Township. Prior to this, Amanda was the Director of Personnel and Public Affairs with Radnor Township, also serving as the Radnor Township Staff Workplace Safety Committee Chairperson. Additionally, she has served as the Assistant Borough Manager for the Borough of Swarthmore, which is close to me. And she has represented the Eastern Region on the Association for Pennsylvania Municipal Management's Professional Development Program Committee, as well as serving on the ICMA Awards Evaluation Panel. She received her MPA from Villanova in 2004. So let's give Amanda a warm welcome.
Please go with his bio?
I can go with his bio. I can go with his bio.
Are we going to share bios? Or
I was going to have you start, and
you
you want a break in there? Wow, Dr. Henderson is an assistant professor in the Department of Healthcare and Public Administration. His current research focuses on administrative discretion, decision-making, collaboration, and performance in emergency medical services, as well as related topics in other local government services. He has previously served as the Chief Administration Officer, Operational Officer, Director, and Volunteer with several emergency services organizations in our area, including the Radnor Fire Company and the Lafayette Ambulance and Rescue Squad. He also received his MPA from Villanova in 2004. So let's give a warm welcome to Alex. So we're just going to open it up for both of you to discuss your stories, how you your presentation and your backgrounds, and how you got into public service, and how you discovered it was your vocation. And
Well, I can start. So for me, it's kind of a very straight line to public service. I grew up in a very public service-minded family. I grew up on a 6-mile island, which community happens because there's you only graduate with maybe 90 kids, so you get to know one another really well. And I grew up with, my mother was a school teacher. My father works for the city of North Warwick. He's the fire chief. He's also the deputy fire marshal for the county, and he, like Alex, was always in volunteer service. He was always in volunteer service and volunteered for a local fire company when he was young. Put it on.
hook her up.
Maybe. I'm not sure. So, good? We're good? All right, okay. So, both parents involved in public service, government. My uncle was a police chief. It goes on and on, really, with my family, and pushed me always to be community service oriented. So as a young kid, I used to get involved in beach cleanups and all types of different things that the government had to offer for the kids to get involved. And when I was in college, I minored in poli-sci. And I had a professor there at the time. I had wanted to be a political analyst because I thought that would be some great thing that I would like to do. And she encouraged me to work for politicians. So at the time, I had worked for several politicians in Philadelphia. I had been involved with a mayoral race at the time. And I realized that I wanted to be behind the scenes doer type more than I wanted to be sort of the policy speaker. So from there, I talked with her actually, and I wound up looking for universities with an MPA program. I had been accepted here and at Penn, and I sat and spoke with Dr. Wieland, and he was very pro into local government, very encouraging. He also, my favorite part was, I'm a doer learner, and he was, we'll put you in an internship right away. So that to me was huge because I knew that you need the experience, number one, and I would learn very quickly by doing. So I wound up here, and it was wonderful, and I was very thankful. And that's sort of how I got into municipal management, and now I'm a manager, and it's great. And there's definitely a vocational calling to do this type of work. It is 24/7. If you decide to get into local government management, and particularly a manager position, it is 24/7. You have to really love people, be dedicated to the public good and to community and what that means. And I actually think that as citizens, we have a job to be a part of community. That's you should know your neighbors. You should be involved in what's happening locally. You should know where your tax dollars go. You should be in for positive change. So, I mean, I can say unequivocally, you have to love community to do this type of a profession, to be successful for sure.
So my story, I would love to say that I got into public service purposefully, but I didn't. It was something I stumbled into, and I think that's okay. There's this great line of research that talks about public service motivation, this idea that people have certain kinds of characteristics or traits, and I'm sure people are smiling, you've probably seen this in class, which is awesome. That people have characteristics or traits or attitudes that will then predict their entrance into the public sector or nonprofit sector. So there's a lot of research that says that happens, and then there's new research that says that people may enter into public organizations and then may kind of generate that public service motivation. So it's kind of a reverse situation. That's kind of what happened with me. I saw the fire service, the volunteer fire service, when I was a 16-year-old as something that would be fun to do. And I hope you got a picture of that. And so I saw it as a thing that would be fun or interesting to do, and I did it, and it was fantastic. And so I was exposed through all of these experiences in the fire service to things like dedication, selflessness, community, altruism, camaraderie. So I had these experiences. I saw my colleagues taking them really seriously, and I said, fantastic, this is neat, I like this. And so it was kind of the exposure and the experience that propelled me into public service. I spent my 4 years here as an undergrad at Villanova. I loved my poli-sci program. I loved getting involved in actually mayoral politics in Philadelphia through one of my professors here. At the end of my senior year, I said I want to keep going with this thing, and I met with Dr. Wieland, who was a great influence on my career. And I said I love local government in the same way that Mandy does. And he said, great, this program would work for you. And so all that time I stayed with the fire department, even while I was in college. I had a fantastic internship with Radnor Township while I was here in the MPA program that was really, had just an amazing impact on my life and my desire to kind of serve people directly. But at the same time, I still worked in fire services. I worked as an EMT, as a paid EMT as well. And then when I finished the MPA program, I ended up as the executive director of the paramedic service in Upper Merion. So it was nice to kind of continue that from nearing my second decade in public service in various ways. But it was fantastic in the same way. I think the nice thing, almost in the same way that North Wildwood propelled Mandy into public service and familial connections, this area can be the same way, even though we're landlocked here, we're not near the ocean. So that's my experience. I think the nice thing is that people can really see it as a calling, not just before they even enter service, but even after they've been in the process for a while. We both have a lot more, I'm sure.
Yeah.
Do you want us to keep going?
Just keep going and just dialogue. Yes, absolutely.
I guess I can add to that too. I think these type of careers, the pull for leadership, I think that if you're that type, and you know that pretty quickly as a student because you tend to be involved. You know, the group gets together and you're doing a project. And somehow you always wind up the one who's coordinating and doing all the work, and maybe you're organizing drinks at the pub for the start of your project. But, you know, it kind of comes naturally to these type of students. And I don't know if it's just all of us have something sort of in common with the MPA program, and here at Villanova in particular. I think that that feeling of, you know, needing to do something better is what leads you into these type of fields. You know, it's similar with like a nursing profession, I'm sure, and teaching. You know, look at you. I mean, you're a professor, you're a doctor now. Look out. And which I'm very proud of. But yeah, I think that, you know, you're shaped in a lot of ways by the time you get here. And by the time you make the choice for graduate school, especially if you're paying for it, which can be different from college for many of us, you're really ready to propel into that next level of what am I going to do for somebody? How can I help in some way? And I think that's what happens.
And I think that may be the best part about professional graduate programs is that we get to spend time in a classroom with people who are involved in so many other kinds of activities. And we get to see their connections between what they do and the kinds of impact they have on people. And that's the most refreshing thing about being a faculty member, is that I get to have this constant revolving door of people who do good things and kind of love their job and love service. So I think I have one of the greatest jobs in the world doing that.
I think I do.
But I think that's the nice part about public service in general, is that we get to see, we get to have a job where we do something that actually matters to people. Not every job out there has a significant impact, but in most cases we can say that, you know, working in nonprofits or working in public service, we do something that somebody cares about, even if they're just taxpayers. But we get to do that in a challenging way with few resources, with not a lot of money these days, under a lot of kind of rule and resource constraints. So we get a lot of challenging jobs that are really high stakes that have a huge impact, and so we should be psyched about going to work every day doing those things. But I love that challenge, and it seems like a lot of my students in my MPA program, and I remember from my experiences here at Villanova, that people loved it because it was fulfilling. Like there was actually something they got from it, and I think we're lucky to kind of be in this sector.
And I'll take it further on the local government management end of that, is that and this is what's different, I would say, in local government than state and federal. And here's my pitch for local government, is I actually get to have an idea, say, of like a park, and I work with tons of volunteers every single day. Managers cannot do much without the volunteers in our communities that step up and will be on a board or will help in any way, because we can't afford them otherwise. Because in a lot of communities, their pedigrees are pretty high, and you're lucky to tap into that because it costs money otherwise. And you're lucky to have people that feel like you and want to see the best happen. So, you know, we get to come up with an idea, you know, and then watch it happen. So I get to say, oh, you know what, a park would be great there. And then we get to have engineers involved and make that a reality. And then we get to actually see kids play in a few years in a safe area that helps, you know, a stay-at-home mom who was looking for something to do at 2 o'clock on a Monday. And then meet new friends because she gets to go now, and there's a group of people that go with their kids, and then those kids become friends in that very setting that you had the idea of, that you get to create. And I said before, I'm a doer learner. I really like having my hands involved in things, and I think that's another trait. You have to be a doer. You have to be able to multitask and do in these type of professions. From the academia level to this level, you'd never get anywhere if you can't, you know, manage that. And I think that's another part of that vocation, is that you want to see things for the greater good. Your goal is community. Your goal is to create the best community that you can for your residents. So.
And I would say something for the students who are here in the room, something you must do is stay in touch with your faculty members, stay in touch with your professors, because when you do good things like that and you come back and tell us, that's fulfilling for us. Mm-hmm. We don't get to see parks that we help to create, but we do get to hear good news from you. And those are some of the best moments for me, when a student says, just checking in, I got a new job, or look, I just put out this new report as part of my job that I just got. It's kind of cool, and I say, yeah, it's kind of cool, and then I brag about it on social media and do all things like that. I mean, it's the best thing in the world. So tell us when you do those things.
I think that the link between the Villanova MPA program and local government is the curriculum kind of gears you towards that. I feel like the link is really very strong. But I was wondering if, Alex, you could talk about how being in the MPA program here propelled you into being in academia, because that link isn't as clear cut.
Yeah. The nice thing is there are a number of Villanova MPAs who have gone on and got a PhD. So there is a connection there, which is really nice. So I will say that Dr. Whelan's class on PA theory, Father Jacob's class, which is universally one of the favorite classes in the program. Sitting here for the NASPA accreditation meeting a couple weeks ago, it was mentioned about 7 or 8 times, at least, as a favorite thing. And it's amazing to me, and I try to emulate him in so many ways. It's amazing to me when somebody makes you work so hard and you want more. Like you just say, I want to do more of this. And so I'll say the theory-heavy classes, Dr. Whelan's class, Father Jacob's class, Professor Moranto, who isn't here anymore, but his personnel class, and Dr. Trainer's class on statistics, a class that I now teach. Those classes were really strong. And so I would say the strength of the coursework is something that lent itself well. It was great preparation for being in a PhD program. It's a different area. It's an entirely different animal in terms of academic work. But if I had not had a strong MPA program, I would not have been in a good place to enter into a PhD program or succeed in that program. But I will say, in a lot of ways, the current Villanova program is something that other MPA programs try to emulate, including my own. Believe me, I get these wonderful emails from Villanova, and I say, wow, they do this one thing really well, and alumni outreach is something they do. And I say, this is something that I want to emulate. And so that's a fantastic thing. But it's nice to see a good program thrive, to see and then compare that to my own experiences as a faculty member. So I have a really intense appreciation for what it means to be in a good MPA program, and I'll say a really intense desire to create a good MPA program too. Yeah.
Now, was there one class in particular that you feel like really truly prepared you? Was it the experiences from the internship that you feel like really truly prepared you for the students who are beginning their journey here in terms of directing them, I guess, maybe towards what would be a really good place for them to be if they're going into local government?
The reality for my end of the spectrum for a profession is you need the potpourri. So you need all those different things. The best thing that happened for me here was it created the foundation I needed for the critical thinking that I have to use every single day. So I may not have the answers to every single question I get, but I know where I can look it up, or I know who I can call because the alumni in this area are mostly managers in this area, and I've become great friends with. So the network of people and the questions that you might have, I could call a professor if I, now in my professional career, thought, theory or different types of things that help with that foundation level. In terms of one particular course, it's hard to say because when you're in this type of a profession, you're hit on 300 levels. So I might get asked, I could have an HR problem in 1 minute. I could have, be thinking about a SWOT analysis in another minute and trying to plan a visioning workshop for, my board, or thinking about statistically. At the same time, I have up on my computer a spreadsheet in Excel, and I'm annoyed because I can't remember the function for my, what I'm working on. But
Just call me.
I know, right? Seriously. This is what we used to do, Alex. It would be like, what do you have? What are you doing? Smarty pants. So, but yeah, so for someone in my profession, the foundation that is created here and the relationships that are created here are critical, especially if you're going to work in this area If your goal is to be in this area, this program is by far the program to be involved in. I will say that. And it's not just because I went here, but with unequivocally, I can say that for a local government track person, this is the program you want to get into. Plus, it's it's Villanova University. So everybody knows Villanova University in this area, especially now that we're in, finally. But, so that is the other benefit of this program. Outside of the coursework, it's the you went to Villanova University, or I grew up in that area. Look at you just made 10 connections when we walked in, childhood connections. But I mean, that's what happens to you in the real world when you're interviewing. You have people, that's how you make connections sometimes quickly. It's, it's not going to be what sorority you were in, because that doesn't really come up. It's going to be more like, you went to that school, you were in this program, I grew up in that area, or I did this, or I did that. So, there's a lot of benefits outside of just, the coursework, being involved in the program, that are amazing here, by far.
Speaking of interviewing, do you have any interviewing tips or ideas or horror stories that you'd like to share as tales of caution?
I definitely do, and I even put notes, but I'll let.
Our notes are not that different. I will, legitimately. I see some of the same exact things. So the one thing when it comes to interviewing jobs or looking for jobs, big thing is research the organization. We have this resource that people didn't have 30 or 40 years ago that we can use to look up organizations.
Thank you,
and
Google.
Google is such a fantastic thing. It makes sense. Websites provide us a ton of information on what the organization does, just functions, mission, vision, values of the organization. Read their annual reports, read whatever other kinds of publications they have, requests for fundraising. It makes sense to just gather as much information as you can. That lets you go into an interview and be able to say, I just read that report that you published last week. I understand this is really important for you, and that's a kind of a crucial thing. So yeah, certainly research the organization, know what's important to them, but also be a part of professional organizations, and it's something you were going to mention. If you join APMM, or ICMA, GFOA, ASPA, we do acronyms well. If you join those organizations, you get both the connections, but you also get kind of discussion about what's the most important thing that's happening in the sector right now. So that's big. I remember going into an interview in local government, and I'd had my internship experience, but I'd not had any other experiences. And the person said, well, you're interviewing to be an assistant manager. That's interesting. Tell me about your experience with this very specific kind of tax. And I said, nope, I have no idea what that is. And he said, well, this is important to us at this moment. So that's kind of a big thing. So do as much research as you can. Use the internet.
Did you get the job?
I did not get the job.
I knew that. You're a doctor now. You have to talk about your bad moments.
Oh, that was one. Yeah. So know the organization.
And I think I'll add too, because I was the director of personnel for a number of years when I was in Radnor, and interviewing is such a funny thing. So it's one thing when you're on the one side, and then when you're on the other side, it's another ballgame, right? You're sweating when you're on the hire me phase. And there's a couple things that I always say to everyone. Because when you come into an interview, you have 300 million things in your head, right? So you've done your research, hopefully. You know what the organization is about. You've looked at financial statements. You know all their committees and how many people they have volunteering. And you have all of that in here, and you have your prepared questions and all of your stuff. And what I will say is when you get in, take a deep breath and listen. Because sometimes what happens, you have so much prepared here to say that you want to get out because you're selling yourself, that you maybe don't listen to the question, or you don't answer the question appropriately because, we're all in our own heads. So I always say, make sure you're listening to what they're asking, because sometimes you get that moment where you just start talking and you're like, wait a minute, what was the question again? And I mean, that happens because, we're all nervous and excited, and it's all good things. But, you need to make sure that you listen to what they're asking of you, and make sure that you answer the question. And if you don't know the answer to the question, draw from anything you have. Because, let me tell you, I mean, there are so many things that people don't know, and you can relate in so many ways to things that you do, that you can answer the question. You can find a way, but you just have to be, quick on your feet and try to, think of something. The other thing that I always say is, as I said, have questions prepared. Have some questions prepared. Make sure that you're engaging them, because as much as they're interviewing them, you're interviewing them. You want to make sure that this is going to be a career or a position for you that you want to be in. And let me tell you, sometimes you get in a room with people and you realize that these are going to be your bosses for the next however many years, and it's not attractive to you anymore. And that's okay. You don't have to, depends on your life situation, but you don't maybe have to take it. You can try to get your ducks in a row and think about it, but make sure you're asking questions to know that you'll fit into that organization, because here's what's going to happen. If you, at that interview, don't think you fit in, and then you take the job, you're going to stumble along the way because you're not comfortable there. And you're not going to grow there, because mentally you may not want to grow there. You're kind of at a holding point. So I would say, make sure that you're interviewing them and asking questions that benefit you to know if you can last in the organization. And I also say, be yourself. Go and be yourself. If you have a funny story, or you walk in the door and something just happened, people, it's people. It's someone like me who's sitting there asking you a question, and I might have spilled coffee on myself 20 minutes before I walked in. We're all on the same planet, so just be yourself, and it'll work. It'll go far for you. That's usually what I used to say for interviews. So.
Open it up to anyone. I heard there was a question earlier. I don't know if that question got answered.
I have a question. So a lot of students, either their first year, second year, they're working part-time, they're working full-time. There's a lot of different arrangements. What is the best advice you could give students to take advantage of the MPA, in addition to just the classes, but just the experience of getting an MPA, so that they can set themselves apart for the interviews, for job opportunities, things like that?
I can start, but
Go for it.
if you get an internship, if you're working through the program, if they've placed you in an internship, use it to your advantage. I was very lucky. I wound up with an internship in Lower Gwinnett Township, and I worked for Larry Communal, who I know teaches here now. I just went to his retirement dinner a few weeks, I think last week it was, and he is such a role model in my life. I was very lucky to work under somebody with his caliber of professionalism. That doesn't always happen, but he was a professional manager, and he had been working there for a number of years and had been in the profession for a number of years. So what was great is I was very clear about what I wanted sort of out of the internship, as much as I was helping, also was take me places. I need to go to meetings. I need to meet people. If I don't network and you don't push me sort of out there, I'm never going to meet these people. When you come out of the program, depending on your age, if you're younger, it's not like you're going to hang out in a bar with, some senior managers. That's not really going to happen for you. So you need to use that to your advantage and say to them, I want to go with you. Because if you don't do that, they're so busy that they might not be thinking, that would be a good opportunity for her or for him to go to. So you really need to put yourself out there constantly and always be selling yourself that way. I can actually remember I was pushed to be involved in APMM and ICMA, and I was very lucky for them to allow me to do that. And I had been in APMM, and at Lower Gwinnett, they had said to me, we have the APMM, it was a joint APMM and New Jersey conference in Atlantic City. And I'm from South Jersey, and I would have been going home that weekend. And they said, why don't you come by? They're having like a reception kind of a thing, and you can come in. It's not like I had to pay to go to the conference. So I said, sure. I went. I was the only intern. It was hysterical. I walked in and the record scratched. Like I felt like it was that moment where it's like, who are you? Yeah, like I felt like everybody, but it was like I couldn't have planned it better, because it got just me in front of a room of managers that are hiring, right? So, or thinking about a project, or thinking about, they may not be ready to hire, but they're gonna remember me because I took that leap. I wasn't and it's nerve-wracking. It is nerve-wracking when you go to those type of events, and you don't know everybody, and you're like, and I'm in my suit, and stuff. But you know what? It was great, and I was lucky to have people do that. So I always say, whatever your job, whatever your intern, whatever you're doing that's involved in whatever your, program is, tell them that you need to network, that you want to go to meetings and you want to learn more. It's important.
Go to everything.
Yeah.
I mean, in all seriousness, take advantage of those opportunities. And it's the same thing in academia. When we go to conferences, we usually go to present research for maybe 15 minutes. But the valuable stuff from the conference comes from the other conversations. Comes from lunch and dinner and coffee, and traveling, even going to the airport with somebody in a cab turns into great conversations and future research and more service opportunities. Something I learned initially from Dr. Wieland, and then even more so from my dean at Rutgers Newark, a guy named Mark Holzer, was say yes to everything. If someone says, here's an opportunity, even if it doesn't perfectly align with what you love, what you think is perfect for you, say yes to it. Do it. Because that can give you some insight into some aspect of public or nonprofit or healthcare service. It never hurts to say yes. It can at least tell you what you don't like to do. So go to everything and say yes to everything, while also maintaining something of a work-life balance.
And I add to that too, you're always selling yourself, no matter where you're at, whatever meeting it is. You're there, one of the best things that happened to me in terms of a job search, I had been in a scenario, there had been a new manager brought in. We knew that the person that was there was really cutting people. It was a layoff type scenario. And I knew it. I had some senior managers who had said right away, whoever got hired by this person, you're going to be on your way out. And I was one of those lucky people. And I was at a health trust meeting. And I just had the conversation with Larry Camino, who was guiding me sort of through the process. And I was at, it was like a lunch meeting, and I thought, I'm going to go, because I knew that there were a lot of managers that were going to be there. And I went, and I literally went up to almost every manager in the room. I said, is anybody hiring? What are you guys, what's happening in your municipality? I've said and started like, hey, you want to hire me? It was more like, how's things going in so-and-so? And are you looking for anybody to work? And I was very lucky. And because of that moment and me doing that, I wound up pretty much securing a job that day.
Wow.
And that's not always the case, but if you don't do that and you don't fight for yourself to get ahead, nobody else is. They don't know. And sometimes what happens, especially in my world, is managers have so much going on. And if they're in a large municipality, they have a lot of people under them and you have a lot of moving parts. But that manager might be thinking, I'd really like to get this project done. And have been thinking about it for 3 years probably, because they've not had a moment to vet it, but they've been thinking about it. And then you come along and you're like, hey, are you looking for anybody? And it's like, oh, well, we could shuffle this and I could do this, and that happens. And I lucked out where this woman, she had a finance director who was retiring, and she was actually looking to make an assistant manager position. And that was how I wound up in Swarthmore. And I was so lucky and thankful, because if I hadn't gotten that job, no way would I have gotten the manager position that I got, within a few years. So again, make sure, like he's saying, go to everything. Tell people that you're looking for a job, and sometimes when you're in a job, you're looking for a job. You just have to say it quieter. But, hey, have you seen my resume? But, you have to promote yourself. You really do.
And I think another thing that matters in terms of that is when you apply for jobs, or when you're in a place where you want to apply for jobs, have a cover letter ready, have a resume ready. Make sure you read it 6 times. Make sure you give it to all of your friends and your family members and your significant other to read every single version, and then read it again. The worst thing you can do is send out a resume or a cover letter, anything with a typo. I say that because I did that. And
Would you like to share that?
So the academic job market is a brutal place to be. It is absolutely brutal. The year that I was looking for a job, I was on the market. There were 150 PhDs coming out, finishing in public policy or public administration, and there were 50 jobs. So a third of the people got the jobs. 20 of those jobs went to economists. So there were 30 jobs for 150 people. Which was made worse by the couple of years before that were also kind of frozen. So there's a lot of competition. And so I know in my case, I sent out a CV that had in one place, double period. And it was the kind of thing that, for me, I'm a little bit obsessive compulsive, and it drove me nuts. I didn't get that job, so review it and read it, and that can be hard.
I don't think it was your punctuation.
I don't think it was either. I don't think it was the double theory.
We hate to be judged.
Don't hold on to that.
No, I'm done.
I don't want you losing sleep.
Every day,
You're amazing.
every single day.
You're amazing, bud.
But have your friends read. It can be hard to be judged. Like, we don't like being judged. It can be but that when someone takes the time to judge you, that means they care about you and what's going to happen to you. Enjoy the judgment.
So for a student who might be pursuing a career either in local government or higher education or in academia, what are some of the greatest challenges that you face on the job that a student should be aware of or thinking about they might face if they were in your shoes?
I'll let you start. Mine's a laundry list.
So, the biggest thing in academia is something that I just mentioned. One of them is there aren't a lot of jobs, especially tenure track jobs as a professor. There are fewer jobs, especially in the humanities. We've been kind of insulated in public administration, public policy, healthcare administration, because we're applied fields. So we're not getting hit quite as hard as history, sociology, English, psychology, some of those fields. So know that there aren't many jobs out there. It can be difficult to get into PhD programs in the first place. They take 4 years, and those 4 years are essentially you kind of lose them to the process. You spend all of your time doing that thing, which is not bad. It's just what happens. It's a reality of the process. So not a lot of jobs. It's really hard. You have to love the topic. If you don't love the topic you're studying, you're not going to want to do it. So really make sure you love it. And my suggestion, if you want to get a PhD in a field, go find the top journal for that field and read the last year or two of journals, every single issue cover to cover. And if you weren't enthralled, if you weren't fascinated, ask some serious, really difficult questions. Academia is tough because enrollment matters for a lot of universities. I have a feeling Villanova is not going to have a problem with applications next year.
No, Dr. Whelan said I think they're on a second-year high or something.
No doubt. In 1985, they had a huge increase. But some universities are really tuition dependent. Enrollment matters. Enrollment in the Northeast is going down, but there are some institutions like Villanova that are kind of insulated from that because it's a great place to be. So financial pressures are big. And then the big thing that matters, both in the nonprofit world, the other half of my life, is how, and this is where Dr. Trainer's class comes in handy, how do we assess, how do we know the outcomes, how do we know what we're actually doing and how we're doing it well? How do we measure that? How do we assess it both qualitatively and quantitatively? How do we communicate to our constituencies? If you can do those things, both deal with data, deal with qualitative and quantitative data, express those things well and engage in fundraising, those are things that will help you overcome some of the bigger barriers to succeeding there.
So for the local government end of it, there are different type of barriers, similar in manner of you talk financial pressure. Every local government is dealing with the fact that we have to do more with less. So that means several things for you. It could mean that they can't hire that professional manager. What's good for the younger students is, though, maybe they could hire the less senior manager who might not be asking for $150,000 a year to start because they don't have the pedigree. That was part of the reason I think I got my job. It was my first management experience, and they knew they could pay me accordingly because I didn't have 20 years behind me to take the position. So that worked to my advantage. But that doesn't always happen. A lot of barriers you also face are with diversity. The people that are hiring you are politicians. And in this area in particular, you don't necessarily get a lot of diversity. It tends to be older white males, to be quite honest. And you come in as the fresh face, especially for a woman, it can be very different. It's, I would say, a lot more difficult in my opinion. But we are making strides. There are a lot of women managers in this area now. But it is hard because you do come from a different place. For me in particular, I didn't even want to consider a manager job until I knew I was done with children. I mean, being a working mom is very difficult. When you're a working mom and you're in the manager of a community, it is extremely difficult. You have a lot of night meetings, and if you have little ones, it's a hard transition to make for your family. especially if you're someone who wants a career. You know, I was always that way. My husband always knew that about me, that I would always be working. I was very career driven. And, you know, I need both of those sides. I love being a mom and I love being a professional. But, you know, it is difficult and you have to think about that. And every interview I ever went on where they're not supposed to ask what you're doing with your children, they will ask you as a female what you're doing with your children. It's one of the first questions, not the first question, but it's weaved in. What are you going to do with your babies? Who's going to watch them? And let me tell you, my response is I've toned down. The first time you get the question, you're red, because you're like, my husband never got asked that question, I'm sure. But you know, you kind of take it in stride because you recognize what's before you, right? So it's like, okay, you know, my response now is my husband and I can make anything work. We're a team. And that's just what I say, and then they can take that for what they want. But it is hard, though. I mean, it is hard. You know, you are away. And the other thing is, you know, you're in the fishbowl. So, you know, when I get a sick kid in CVS and I'm trying to get a prescription and get out the door, I might run into somebody who's like, what about that development? And wants to talk to you for 20 minutes. And you're like, you know. So it's hard. I mean, it's hard balancing the two. I'm still learning about balancing it. I'm trying my hardest. But, you know, there's days that are hard. You know, you got to figure out what you're doing. And that's a different thing. I would say this generation is changing where the men are way, you know, a lot involved. But the generation of men that are interviewing you, that was maybe not the case so much. So they do tend to question that. I would also say you do worry about with politics is that sort of political patronage end of it. You know, there's a community in this area not far from here who just actually transitioned from a professional manager to a non-professional manager, and it was a political appointment. And for those of us that, you know, have done the work and have done the education and fully believe that professional management is critical in communities, it's hard because that is a possibility for everyone, especially as you get into smaller communities. That happens a lot. I'm from South Jersey, and let me tell you, I have friends who have all been appointed, and I'm like, did you go to school for government? And, you know, maybe not so much, but, you know, it happens. And I think, you know, the good news, though, is in Pennsylvania, we are the second state with the most municipalities, with the most local governments. I think it's Illinois, Pennsylvania, and Texas. So those three states are where you want to get hired. A lot going on. And here, you know, I mean, that's one benefit. There's a lot of places to send your resume. When I sent my resume out, I literally sent my resume to 60 communities. I blanketed South Jersey and this area because I thought it can't hurt. And at the time, you know, I thought if it gets me in the door and it gets me an interview role, because that's the other thing, you know, you know, your first interview, you always suck. I mean, you're always like, you know, you got to get the cobwebs off of you and kind of get yourself back in the rhythm. Where you can answer the question of what would you do with this tax or whatever the question was. You can come up with
I still don't have an answer.
But yeah, so, you know, and the value shift is actually interesting. I think that the younger generations, we have different ideas in mind for career, right? So you want to balance family and you want to have work too. But, you know, the things like traditional work weeks. In the private sector right now, you have a lot of people who can virtually work from home a couple days a week at least, if not some of them full time. My sister-in-law right now works for Siemens Company, and she gets to work from home every day. And for her as a mother, I mean, there's good in there and there's bad in there. I mean, I'm sure there's days that she's like, oh, what the heck was I thinking? But, you know, you have that challenge too. One positive, though, for local government to the, you know, converse of that is the hours are pretty good. You know, if you are somebody who has family and, you know, you want to, you know, not have to, you don't always have to work until 10 o'clock at night, you know. Your day is pretty normal with everybody else's. So that's, you know, good. But, and then the last thing that I would say too is there's pension issues. A lot of people, the old mentality was, like for my parents who both were pensioners, was you didn't get paid much, but you had great benefits. And that shift has also changed, especially now that you have more professionals involved and, you know, the pay scales are different. And pensions are going away. So I had pensions and now I don't have a pension as a manager. And, you know, in my mind of the profession and growing up with parents that were pensioners, you kind of think, oh, that's going to be great, you know, one day. Because if I love this career, I hope to be in it till I retire. And, you know, you think about that. You have to think differently because you don't get that private sector bonus or raise or, you know, where you can put that into your, you know, whatever retirement package you have. It's a different field now in terms of your career for people and thinking about, you know, what your long-term benefits are going to be. But if you're smart and you plan it out, you'll be okay.
I say also don't be afraid to ask. And that's both when you're in the job. If you have an issue or problem, ask somebody. It's better to ask right away than it is to try to figure it out yourself and not. But even when you're not in a job, or even, you know, if you're looking for a new area to go into, ask. You can send your resume out to 60 people, and that gets your foot in the door. People will say yes in some cases. I just sent out a request for reviewers, asking people to do a job for me for free that was going to have no benefit for them. This is for a journal that I'm editing. Hi, I'm Alex. Please do this thing for me. You get nothing out of it. Thanks. And this is people. These are professors in 4 different countries: Canada, Australia, UK, and US. And they said yes. More than a dozen of them have said yes, and I've never met them. Like, they're just random people, and they just got an email from some guy at Long Island University, and they're like, sure, no problem. It never hurts to ask. Things might actually work out. Yeah.
I did have one more question, and it was back to public service motivation. You're both, obviously, you know what drives you, you know where you want to be, you know what you want to do, you know what fuels your commitment. But in your day-to-day, when you're working with employees and that kind of thing, what do you do, or how do you keep them engaged, keep them motivated, feed into or tap into what's going to feed them?
From my vantage point, it's team. You are only as smart as the people that surround you. You cannot know everything. You just can't. You need to know who to ask, though, to jump on his ask moment, is you need to say to yourself, a lot of times it can be humbling, I'm not an engineer. So, you know what, I don't know, you know, what the elevation should be of whatever. I mean, I joked with my engineer today because he had 300 terms for curbs. And I'm like, really? Can we just call it a curb? The rolled curb, the upright curb, you know, and I kind of laughed, and I need to know that, though, and I'm learning it. But, you know, you're only as smart as the people surrounding you. So, you know, a way for me, too, is including everybody. That's the other problem. Sometimes in larger organizations, everybody has a part, so you're sort of like a little cog in the overall wheel. But if somebody doesn't bring you together to tell you what's happening, it's brutal. And it's really hard for you to do your job. I do staff meetings after every board meeting to make sure that everybody knows what's on the agenda, what's been talked about, because your receptionist is the one who starts the call, who says, why is this that, or why did they do that, and you know, they're arguing. You need every person educated. Every person needs to know what's going on, because we also work for politicians. I could be gone tomorrow, and somebody's going to need to fill my shoes, and my goal is not to ever leave anywhere and not make it better than what it was. So I want to make sure that not any one of us are indispensable. You need to make sure everybody knows what everybody's doing, because you know, there's days that my assistant has to jump right into my seat, and it could be because I'm at an hour meeting, but something's going on and he has to take over the role. So I think that you empower your employees with knowledge. I think by keeping everybody engaged, by making sure everybody knows and saying, you know what, I don't know the answer to that. Can you guys help me out? Can we kind of like brainstorm how I need to do this, or whatever it is? And I think that is how you keep people wanting to do more. And they also want to do more for you too. Because if I don't walk in the room like, oh, you know, I'm the head whatever, you know, you need to recognize that, you know, you don't know everything. It's just impossible.
I would say remembering that whatever thing you're doing, if it's in a nonprofit or a public organization, local, state, federal government, or in academia, everything you're doing matters to somebody, and as long as you can remember that it matters to somebody and how it matters, it makes even the smallest things on a day-to-day basis a little bit easier. And if you can remember that, which is a hard thing, we get kind of bogged down in the kind of the everyday activities. If you can remember that, if your colleagues can remember that, it makes everything a little bit easier. And for me, in being an academic, research is really fun. I get to work with people from different countries and different service sectors, people who are actually doing work, like doing things, like making parks that you can go visit. I get to work with them and talk about their experiences and perspectives, and that's fun for me. But what happens to research after that's always kind of hazy. Do people actually read it? If they read it, is there any benefit to that research? You hope so. I mean, the moments for me that I love is when I find one of my articles on somebody else's syllabus, and I'm like, that's awesome. Somebody's actually assigning my research. It's only happened twice. But the things, like, to me, what really matters are the students. If even half of my day-to-day activities are really intently focused on making students better able to do something, then they go out there and they're doing good things, and they're doing good. So that's the best part, and that's what keeps me, even like in the darkest moments when I've been reviewing papers for 10 hours and I'm on my second pot of coffee. I remember that this particular student is a really good person and they deserve every bit of my attention. So the connection to the end goal, it's an important thing.
And I'll just add too, I think including people in the rewards. So like when good things happen, sometimes when, it's DEFCON 5 and everybody's kind of involved and we're like, oh, making sure people get to see the reverse side of that too is important. When you have the ribbon cuttings and you have the other things, in my job, the politicians are the star and you're the worker bees. So, I don't really take much credit for anything unless I'm in the room alone with them and I can be like, I kind of helped us do that. But, other than that, in a public meeting, I'm like, you guys, everything's great and we're all doing a great job. And they are. I'm actually very lucky right now. I work for some great people. But, so I think including your employees in those moments, because, if they don't go to the public meeting and they don't get to see the accolades or they don't get to hear the positives, you need to make sure people hear the positives. You also need to make sure sometimes when you get that call and your employee did something great, that you also reiterate that to your board and you let people know, like, there are great things happening here every single day. There might be complaints every day too, but there are also great things happening every day. And I think when you include your employees in all of those moments, it makes for a better organization just on a whole.
Because I was going to jump in with one last question, but I didn't want to take time from anyone else. You obviously love your jobs. You obviously love what you do. So what was the aha moment when you went, this is where I'm supposed to be? And you just knew that this was the position, this was like nirvana, this was, you are what you wanted to be when you grew up. Like, when did you hit that moment?
Well, I'll tell you what. After I got my position as manager, and they called me and said, you got the job. And I knew several senior managers that were also applying. And I kept thinking, oh God, I don't stand a chance. I mean, I knew their resumes. I'd worked with them. I was very familiar, And when I got that call, I went home and watched Working Girl, and I listened to Let the Rivers Rise. And I was like, I felt so good and so proud and happy for myself. And, hey, it was my moment, and I was proud. And, I have kids, and the night that I was, that they appointed me publicly, I had my 4- and 6-year-old there because I thought I have a daughter and a son, and they need to see what I'm doing and why I'm not home, sometimes. And that was really important for me. And I had that moment of like, knowing this is what I'm supposed to do. And I mean, you also get that feeling too when you're in a crisis situation and you get through it. I've had sewer main breaks on Baltimore Pike in the middle of the night, and you figure it out and you feel really good because you know what to do. And it's like, yes, like, okay, I'm all right, I got it. But you have moments, I'm sure he has moments like that all the time, when you reach a kid and, you can explain something. It's awesome.
So I think there's kind of like a gradient of classes. There are classes where you walk out of class and people participated and they laughed at dumb jokes and they had fun and they responded, they read the text, and it's a really good class. And then there are classes where everybody gets everything you were trying to get across to them. And they have a great time and they don't want to leave at the end of the class. And you don't want to leave. But you have to because it's over and people have to leave. And so like the end of that class, and I had one of those in my first semester, and I almost skipped across campus. I was just to my car. I was so happy. I was like, this is amazing. They got it. I'm born to do this. What I'll say is, in almost any job, and I have this even now, even this semester, there'll be nights that'll be the exact opposite of that. And that's okay. And I think, so as often as we may think, wow, I found this awesome job, I love this job, it's amazing, you're gonna have days where it's like, oh, that did not go well. But there's moments where you say, all right, so what derailed, what went wrong, how do I change something to make it just a little bit better? I'm glad I'm not dealing with sewer main breaks when I'm just dealing with being in a classroom. Because if I mess that up, that's...
Well, you have that moment where you find out that tragedy has struck and you're like, is it going into the stream? where am I? Do I have to call the DV? Who do I call first? And again, I say you're only as smart as the people that surround you. In your aha moment, in your down moments, you need to make sure that you know who to call or what to do when you have a situation. And that's important. That's what Villanova provides. That's what they provided me, a network of people and a knowing where I don't ever feel alone. I don't feel alone. I don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm drowning on something, or, somebody said something, how do I handle it? I have somebody to call because of this program. I met so many people.
That's wonderful.
Awesome.
That is very awesome.
So great
Well,
to
we're
hear.
awesome.
You are. You're the power team.
And, jokingly, I said to him, I was like, are we two of the best MPA alums ever? Or I'm not sure. We'll have to ask Dr. Wheelan. No, I'm kidding.
Well, I have to say, when I was looking through everything that was available to be able to write your bios, I did notice that your name showed up on another panel in a Villanova MPA
Of
Leaders
course.
Lounge article. So this is not your first presentation rodeo. We've called you back before. And I did not want to, stop you in your tracks or anything. Like, if you had any closing thoughts, anything else that you wanted to share, any pearls of wisdom that you wanted to make sure that we got to nibble on.
In my 6 years at Villanova as an undergrad and as a grad student, in those 6 years, we went to the NCAA tournament once in 1999. I was there at the Bradley Center in Milwaukee when we lost in the first round to Ole Miss. It was an 8-9
It's a tough
matchup.
one.
You're here right now going into a Final Four game.
Awesome.
Enjoy every minute of this.
Yes.
Like, just marinate in
Yes.
this and love it, and don't forget it.
And thank you for being here. It's a Thursday night, and we're in the Final Four. And
Totally.
I'm actually shocked even we have a couple students. Well, one, our lone ranger. You're perfect. You might be the next top MPA
I also
graduate.
bought my Final Four t-shirt today. And
Perfect.
at my work break, so I mean,
Yeah.
I'm all
Live it out.
set.
You're in.
I was actually sent out of my office
To get
to
people.
hold the line for
Was there
everyone.
yeah, because they ran out and then they
Well,
had
no,
other shipments.
my coworkers went about 3 times to the bookstore today, 2 of my coworkers, and they kept saying, nope, they're not ready yet. Come back in a half hour. So they come back in a half hour. Nope, not ready yet. They were getting really mad. So then at one point, in the late afternoon, they were like, all right, Julianne, can you just like go and just kind of like stake out like the bookstore?
We're all going to make sacrifices in this team.
Yeah, right, exactly.
We all have to make
You can order
sacrifices.
them online and pick them up at the bookstore. That's the other thing I learned.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
they didn't keep it.
Seriously, you should have called.
Yeah, right.
Use your network.
That you were talking to?
No, no,
Okay.
no,
Yeah,
it
yeah.
was, nope.
So-
Yeah, so then I went,
I was picking up. I did 3 different runs for the
That's
Final
smart.
Four.
yeah, then I had about
I know.
10 t-shirts in my hand, and I told my
Yeah.
boss, and I said, all right, they're ready, come on.
That's great. You just got yours too, right?
I'm amazed. I walked in and bought T-shirts and walked out.
That's amazing.
What? It was a zoo when I went. What time did you go?
Just before this,
Yeah.
I got here early.
Yeah, it's the time to go.
They must have used.
There are a lot of shirts. Lots
This
of
was so
shirts.
wonderful. I just want to thank you for your
Thank
words
you
of
for
wisdom,
having us.
for your amazing experience. This is going to be a great resource for our students and our
Good.
alums and our stakeholders. I mean, it
Good.
really is.
We might
Good.
follow up for some ads and marketing on the website.
Yes. Yes.
Sure.
Featured
Yeah.
Yes, it was excellent. It was excellent.
And the girls know, like the better pictures. Boys don't care.
No.
She will. She'll take care. If there's anybody shots for you.
I told the girl in the video, I'm like, you can zoom in him all day, but it is not like summer, and I am not in my best mood. You better hold off.
No. Trust me. Oh, I know. My sister takes horrible pictures
my
and
God.
posts them. I'm like,
Screw
why
it.
did you just be
You're like, take it down. Take it
Seriously.
down.
like selective?
I know. Please, don't even. Please. Chin moment. Yeah, no chin moments.
No.
He's fine with it.
Am I? So let's talk about that photo you put on the flyer. No. The internet.
Yeah.